The grocery store that once dominated your neighborhood corner, it generated more revenue than Walmart. The chain your mom loved, it had 2,000 locations across America. So why does searching for them online return almost nothing? The year was 1859, and two guys named George Gilman and George Hartford had a wild idea. What if people could buy groceries from a chain of stores instead of just the corner market? They called it the Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company. A&P for short. Makes sense, right? By the 1930s, these guys had cracked the code. Over 15,000 stores dotted America like freckles on a kid's face. Your grandparents probably shopped there. Your great-grandparents definitely did. A&P wasn't just a grocery store, it was the grocery store. Here's the thing, though. A&P got cocky. They figured their own brand products and rock-bottom prices would keep customers forever. And for a while in the 1970s, it worked. Walk into any A&P and you'd find their store brands cheaper than anything else on the shelf. But then something funny happened. Well, funny if you weren't an A&P executive. Competition got fierce. Their stores looked like they hadn't been updated since the Eisenhower administration. Bankruptcy hit them like a freight train, not once, but multiple times. After more than 150 years of feeding America, A&P finally threw in the towel in 2015. The company that basically invented grocery shopping as we know it just disappeared. And speaking of companies that seemed unstoppable, while A&P was building its grocery empire, another chain was quietly making moves in Chicago. National Tea Company opened its doors in 1899, right as the new century was about to begin. Talk about perfect timing. The company hit its stride during the mid-20th century boom. Families were moving to suburbs, cars were becoming affordable, and everyone needed a reliable place to buy groceries. National Tea delivered exactly that. They weren't flashy or revolutionary, just solid, dependable grocery stores that gave customers what they wanted. By their peak, National operated over 1,600 stores nationwide. That's a lot of milk and bread sales. Customers loved the full-service approach and reasonable prices. The chain built genuine loyalty in neighborhoods across America. But the 1980s brought trouble. Ownership changed hands repeatedly. Like a hot potato, nobody wanted to hold for too long. Each new owner promised big changes, but the losses kept piling up. Competition from newer, more efficient chains made things worse. The math eventually stopped working. In 1999, National Tea filed for bankruptcy and shut down completely. After a century of serving American families, the chain that once dominated grocery aisles simply vanished. Speaking of vanishing grocery chains, there's another story brewing in the Midwest that involves a bright red bird mascot. While A&P dominated the East Coast and National Tea ruled Chicago, something completely different was happening in the Midwest. Red Owl wasn't just another grocery store. It was practically a religion in small towns across Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the Dakotas. Picture this, a bright red owl mascot grinning at you from every aisle. That little guy became more recognizable than some politicians in these parts. Red Owl started regular operations in the 1920s, but they really hit their stride after World War II when suburbia exploded. Smart timing, right? The company understood something bigger chains missed. They didn't try to be everything to everyone. Instead, they focused on being the neighborhood store that actually knew your name. Their private label products weren't fancy, but they were reliable and cheap. Most families had Red Owl canned goods stacked in their pantries like building blocks. But here's where things get interesting. Success can be a trap. Red Owl grew so comfortable in their small-town bubble that they missed the warning signs. When Super Value swooped in and bought them in 1988, it seemed like a rescue. Wrong move. Super Value had different ideas about branding. They wanted efficiency over personality. Within 5 years, every Red Owl store either got a new name or closed forever. Speaking of personality disappearing, wait until you hear about what happened to Bohacks in New York. While Red Owl was busy painting the Midwest red, New York City had its own grocery empire that nobody talks about anymore. Bohacks wasn't just another corner store, it was the neighborhood champion that made grocery shopping feel like visiting family. Henry C. Bohack opened his first store in 1887, and man, did New Yorkers fall hard for this place. The secret wasn't fancy marketing or corporate nonsense. Bohacks won hearts with something simple. They actually cared about their customers. Workers knew your name, remembered what you bought last week, and probably asked about your kids. Revolutionary concept, right? But here's what really set them apart. Their store-branded desserts were legendary. We're talking about cakes and pastries that had people crossing borough lines just to get a taste. The community spirit was real too. Bohacks sponsored local baseball teams, supported neighborhood events, and made every location feel like the heart of the block. Then corporate America happened. The company got expansion fever in the 1960s, trying to compete with the big chains moving into their territory. They lost that personal touch that made them special. The friendly neighborhood vibe disappeared faster than free samples on a Saturday afternoon. After 90 years of serving New Yorkers, Bohacks shuttered forever in 1977. Speaking of Philadelphia chains that flew too close to the sun, Food Fair started in Philadelphia back in the day and grew into something pretty massive. We're talking over 1,000 stores at their peak. That's not small potatoes. What made them different? Weekly prize giveaways that had people lining up like it was Black Friday every Tuesday. Deep discounts in the 70s when inflation was eating everyone's wallet alive. Smart move, right? But here's where things get messy. Food Fair couldn't resist the temptation of big acquisitions. They kept buying up other chains, loading themselves with more debt than a college student with credit cards. The math just didn't work. Then there's the name change situation. Somewhere along the way, they decided Food Fair wasn't catchy enough and switched to Pantry Pride. Same stores, same problems, different sign out front. Makes you wonder if they thought a rebrand would magically fix their financial mess. Well, it didn't. By 1981, both Food Fair and Pantry Pride were toast. Bankruptcy wiped them clean off the East Coast map. All those prize giveaways and discount strategies meant nothing when the bills came due. Some locations survived by becoming different supermarkets entirely. New owners, new names, fresh start. But the original brands, gone forever, joining the growing list of grocery chains that couldn't handle the heat of American retail competition. Down in Houston, a grocery chain was quietly revolutionizing how Americans shopped for food. Weingartens didn't just sell groceries, they invented the self-service concept that every modern supermarket uses today. Harris and Joe Weingarten started small in 1901, but their big breakthrough came when they ditched the old model. You know, back when clerks grabbed everything for you from behind counters? Well, Weingarten said, forget that, and let customers roam free through the aisles. Revolutionary stuff for 1920. After World War II ended, they exploded across Texas and the South. Their bakeries became legendary. Fresh bread, cakes, and pastries that made your mouth water from 3 aisles away. But here's what really set them apart. The staff actually cared. They remembered your name, asked about your kids, made shopping feel personal even in a big store. The weird part is how quickly it all fell apart. Grand Union swooped in during 1980, bought the whole chain, and immediately started selling off locations like garage sale items. Different companies grabbed different stores, slapped new names on them, and erased decades of customer loyalty. By the mid-1980s, Weingartens had vanished completely. But speaking of vanishing acts, let's head north to Ohio, where another pioneer was about to learn the same harsh lesson. Back in 1933, while most Americans were scraping together nickels for bread, 3 guys in Columbus, Ohio, decided to open the biggest grocery store anyone had ever seen. Big Bear stores didn't just sell food. They basically invented the warehouse shopping experience decades before Costco existed. Here's what made them crazy smart. While other stores kept everything behind counters and made customers ask clerks for help, Big Bear said, grab whatever you want. Their slogan, the store that's all yours. Revolutionary stuff for the 1930s. These weren't your typical corner groceries. Big Bear built massive warehouse-style locations that could fit 3 regular supermarkets inside. Customers loved wandering those giant aisles, filling up carts with everything from canned goods to cleaning supplies. The prices stayed low because they bought in huge quantities and kept overhead costs down. For 60 years, Big Bear dominated Ohio and surrounding states. Families made weekend trips just to shop there. But here's where things get interesting. The same formula that made them pioneers eventually became their downfall. When Walmart and other mega chains showed up in the 1990s, they made Big Bear look small. The company that once revolutionized grocery shopping suddenly couldn't compete with even bigger players. Speaking of California innovations, one chain took organization to the extreme. While most grocery stores were busy copying each other's layouts, Alpha Beta decided to do something revolutionary. They organized their aisles alphabetically. Apples before bread, cereal before dairy. Simple? Absolutely genius. Founded in California, Alpha Beta made grocery shopping feel less like a treasure hunt and more like using a phone book. You knew exactly where to find everything. No more wandering around looking for pasta sauce while your ice cream melted in the cart. The system worked so well that busy families became obsessed with the efficiency. During the 70s and 80s, Alpha Beta stores were packed with customers who appreciated not wasting time. Their slogan practically wrote itself, "Shopping made simple." The alphabetical system wasn't just a gimmick either. It genuinely sped up the entire shopping experience. Workers could restock faster, customers could shop quicker, and everyone went home happier. But here's where things get interesting. Success made Alpha Beta a target for bigger fish. Lucky stores swooped in during the early 1990s and bought the whole operation. Within months, those distinctive Alpha Beta signs started disappearing. The alphabetical system, gone. The brand name, history. The innovation that made them special became just another forgotten grocery store trick. Speaking of forgotten tricks, wait until you hear about Red Food Store's approach to winning over entire communities. While other grocery chains were busy trying to be everything to everyone, Red Food Stores took a different approach. They stayed small, stayed local, and stayed connected to their communities across the Southeast. Starting in Chattanooga back in the early 1900s, these weren't your flashy supermarkets with fancy lighting and promotional gimmicks. Red Food was the neighborhood store where clerks knew your name and your usual order. Walk into any location and you'd find produce that actually looked fresh, not like it had been sitting under fluorescent lights for weeks. Their prices stayed fair when other chains started playing pricing games that confused shoppers more than helped them. But here's the thing about being the friendly neighborhood store. It works great until a giant shows up with deeper pockets and longer hours. When Walmart started rolling into small southern towns in the late 1980s, Red Food faced something they'd never dealt with before. Competition that could sell below cost just to drive others out. The family loyalty that had sustained Red Food for decades suddenly wasn't enough. Customers still loved the personal service, but 20 cents cheaper on milk adds up when you're feeding a family. By 1994, B.I. Lowe swooped in and bought what remained, erasing another piece of Southern grocery history. Speaking of regional powerhouses facing unexpected challenges, while A&P dominated nationally and Red Food ruled the Southeast, Safeway was quietly building something special on the East Coast. Most people remember Safeway as a West Coast chain, but here's what they don't know. The company once had a massive eastern division that stretched from Virginia to Maine. During the 1970s, Safeway's eastern stores were absolutely crushing it. Walk into any location, and you'd find housewives lined up for those famous green stamps. Collect enough stamps, get a toaster. Makes sense, right? But the real draw was their meat department. These guys had butchers who actually knew what they were doing, not just teenagers with hairnets. The weird part is how quickly everything fell apart. Safeway's East Coast stores couldn't adapt fast enough when shopping habits changed in the 80s. People wanted bigger stores, more variety, and frankly, better prices. Giant Food and other regional players started eating their lunch. Then, there was the corporate decision that sealed their fate. Safeway's executives decided the Eastern Division wasn't worth the headache anymore. By the late 1990s, they'd sold off nearly every East Coast location. Today, you'll find Safeway thriving in California and Alaska, but those Eastern stores, ancient history. Speaking of ancient history, let's talk about a chain that somehow managed to stick around even longer before finally giving up the ghost. While Safeway was retreating from the East Coast, another grocery giant was already crumbling right under everyone's noses. Grand Union had been around since the 1870s, started by a guy who thought he could revolutionize how Americans bought their food. Well, he wasn't entirely wrong. Just ask anyone who shopped there in the 80s. Grand Union became famous for two things: quirky TV commercials that somehow stuck in your head for weeks, and those massive superstore conversions that made regular grocery stores look like corner shops. They'd take an old building and transform it into this grocery wonderland with bakeries, delis, and aisles that seemed to stretch forever. The coupon programs? Legendary. Customers would show up with stacks of coupons thicker than phone books, and Grand Union welcomed it all. But here's where things get interesting. And by interesting, I mean catastrophic. The company got drunk on expansion, store after store after store, all financed with borrowed money. When the bills came due in the 90s, reality hit harder than a shopping cart with a broken wheel. Bankruptcy arrived in 1995 like an unwelcome surprise guest. The brand limped along for nearly 2 more decades, but the writing was on the wall. By 2013, even the most loyal Grand Union shoppers had to find somewhere new to clip their coupons. While chains across America were struggling to find their identity in the 1990s, Smitty supermarkets had already figured out what customers wanted. They just didn't know it wouldn't last forever. These Arizona pioneers opened their doors in the 1960s with a revolutionary idea. Why make people choose between grocery shopping and grabbing a meal? Smitty's built massive stores with full food courts right inside. You could buy milk, pick up prescription drugs, and eat a burger all under one roof. It was like a mall, but for food. Families loved it. Kids begged their parents to shop at Smitty's because they knew they'd get fed afterward. The stores became weekend destinations rather than just grocery runs. Smart move, right? Well, here's where things get interesting. By the mid-1990s, everyone wanted a piece of what Smitty's had built. Smith's Food and Drug swooped in and bought them out, promising to keep the magic alive. But mergers rarely work that way. The Smitty's name started disappearing faster than free samples on a Saturday afternoon. All those innovative food courts and family-friendly vibes got swallowed up in corporate rebranding. Sometimes being ahead of your time just makes you an easier target for bigger fish. Speaking of being ahead of their time, another chain was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Food Lion prowled into North Carolina in the 1950s, and by the 1980s was absolutely dominating the Southeast. Their low prices, no waiting slogan wasn't just marketing fluff. They meant business. While other grocery stores were adding fancy displays and gourmet sections, Food Lion kept things brutally simple. Basic shelves, minimal staff, rock-bottom prices. Customers didn't care about the bare-bones atmosphere when they were saving serious money on groceries. The chain expanded like wildfire, opening hundreds of locations across Virginia, Tennessee, Georgia, and beyond. Shopping there felt like being part of some secret club where everyone knew how to stretch a dollar. Then, 1992 happened. ABC's Primetime Live dropped a bombshell investigation that made Food Lion's cost-cutting look downright scary. Hidden cameras caught employees selling expired meat, bleaching fish to make it look fresh, and other practices that would make your stomach turn. The footage was brutal. Suddenly, those low prices didn't seem worth the risk. Customers fled in droves, lawsuits piled up, and Food Lion's reputation took a beating it never fully recovered from. The company retreated from many markets, closing hundreds of stores outside their core territory. While Food Lion still exists today in certain regions, it's a shadow of its former empire. Speaking of Florida empires, one chain tried mixing groceries with something completely different. While most grocery chains crashed spectacularly, some died quietly in boardrooms. Florida Choice represents one of corporate America's most calculated retreats from the Sunshine State. Kroger launched this experiment in 1980 as SoupyRx Food and Drugs. The concept seemed brilliant on paper. Combine pharmacy services with groceries to capture Florida's exploding retiree population. Makes sense, right? Older customers need both medications and milk in one convenient trip. The chain quickly expanded to 43 locations by acquiring smaller competitors and converting existing stores. But here's the weird part. Kroger was simultaneously fighting a war it couldn't win. Florida's supermarket landscape had turned into a bloodbath by the mid-1980s. Publix dominated the state like a king, while Winn-Dixie held the budget-conscious crowd hostage. Then there's the competition problem nobody talks about. Every major chain wanted Florida's year-round growth and tourist dollars. The market became oversaturated faster than a sponge in a rainstorm. By 1988, Kroger threw in the towel completely. They sold every Florida Choice location to Cash and Carry and Goodings, then packed up their corporate bags and headed north. No fanfare, no bankruptcy drama, just a quiet admission that some battles aren't worth fighting. Speaking of Goodings, the chain that bought several Florida Choice stores had its own ambitious plans brewing. Goodings supermarket started with big dreams in 1964. Florida was booming, and somebody had to feed all those new residents and tourists flooding into the Sunshine State. The chain became famous for something pretty revolutionary back then, staying open 24 hours. While other grocery stores locked their doors at sunset, Goodings kept the lights on. Night shift workers, insomniacs, and Disney tourists stumbling back from the parks could grab milk and bread at 3 a.m. Pretty smart move, right? They weren't just about convenience, though. Goodings was the first supermarket in Orlando to have an actual bakery and deli inside the store. Fresh bread, sliced turkey, the whole 9 yards. This was upscale grocery shopping before anyone really knew what that meant. But here's where things get interesting. Disney World opened in 1971, and Goodings found themselves in the perfect spot. Tourists needed groceries, locals wanted quality food, and the chain seemed unstoppable. Then the 90s hit like a freight train. Competition got fierce, costs went up, and those fancy 24-hour operations suddenly seemed expensive. Financial troubles started piling up faster than shopping carts in a parking lot. Most stores got sold off one by one, leaving just a single location hanging on today.